In this video, I'm going to show you the 6 types of investment banking interview questions you need to master before going into the interview. These are the same 6 types of investment banking interview questions we have our students prepare for to maximize their chances of landing the internship or job. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how to go through each of these 6 types of investment banking interview questions, as well as some little known tricks to answer them the most effectively, and the number 1 type of interview question you need to absolutely crush in the interview. Let's get started. So with our first type of interview question here, we have the technical questions. Now, most people think that technical questions are the most important type of investment banking interview question, but in reality, that's not the case. Believe it or not, as you'll see a little bit later on in the video, it's really the behaviorals that are the most important types that you need to absolutely crush. The technical questions are really just more of a stamp to show that you know your stuff, and they're not really a massive deciding factor in terms of whether or not you're going to get the internship or job. Now, some firms place higher weight on technicals, whereas others don't really even care about them anymore. So when you're walking into an investment banking interview, you obviously want to make sure that you understand the technicals. But again, it's the stuff that we'll discuss later on that's the most important in terms of getting you the actual internship or job. So within the technical questions, it's kind of broken down into a couple different categories. So first, we have the accounting type questions. Next, we have our valuation-based questions. Then, every once in a while, you'll see some brain teasers. And then lastly, we'll have some more advanced types of questions, which are model-specific, like your M&A modeling questions or your LBO type modeling questions. So for our first type of technical investment banking interview questions, we have the accounting-based questions. Now, we get a lot more in-depth in these in the video linked below, but at a high level, here's how they work. The accounting questions probably represent maybe 75% of the technical interview questions you might get, and the rest will probably be valuation based, maybe a couple brain teasers, and maybe one on the advanced modeling like we'll discuss in a little bit. Now, within the accounting based questions, it really just revolves around your knowledge of the 3 financial statements. So if you know how to model, and you know how to properly balance a full 3-statement model, these should be relatively easy for you. But if you're someone that's trying to memorize them off of a guide, or you're not very familiar with accounting, you can get thrown off of these pretty easy because the interviewers will know how to kind of reword these a little bit differently just to throw you off in case you did memorize things. So these questions could be things like this. If a company's depreciation goes up by $10 million on the income statement, how does that affect the other financial statements? Or if company A buys company B, how is goodwill involved in that? Or it can even be something easy like, what's the most important financial statement? So as long as you have a pretty good grasp on accounting, you should be fine with these. But if you're struggling with the accounting and you're not very familiar with a lot of this stuff, this is what I would recommend you spending the majority of your time studying, is the accounting-based questions, because like I said, they'll probably take up 75% of the technical questions you might get in an investment banking interview. Next up for our technical questions, we have the valuation-based questions. Now, the valuation-based questions will probably take up around 25% of the technical investment banking interview questions you might get. And these primarily revolve around your knowledge of how a discounted cash flow model works, as well as how a comparables analysis works in terms of different valuation methods. Now, these can be questions like, walk me through a DCF, or how do you calculate WACC, or if you were trying to value a chemicals company, which valuation metric would you use and why? And like I said before, we get a lot more into these types of questions in the video linked below. But as long as you are pretty familiar with how a DCF works and how to do a comparables evaluation analysis for different companies, you should be fine with these. So next up, we have the brain teasers. Now, these are a little more rare and you don't see them as often in terms of investment banking interview questions, but every once in a while you will. And the whole idea behind these is for people just to throw you off. Now, brain teasers are kind of like this. So for example, if you had all the marbles in the world, how many marbles would it take to fill up all the buildings in New York City? Now, the way you want to approach these types of brain teasers is kind of like this. So number one, take some time to think about how you would actually answer this. So if you don't know how to answer it at first, that's totally fine. You can literally say something like, okay, give me a second. Let me think about how I would approach this. Step two, slowly talk about how you would come to your answer out loud. Again, the whole point here is for them to throw you off, and they also want to see how you think. So as long as you're kind of composing yourself and slowly talking about how you would come to the answer out loud, that's all you need to do. Step three, don't really expect to get an exact answer. Again, unless you have a lot of data in front of you, you're not going to be able to figure out how many marbles are going to fit in all the buildings in New York City unless you have the square footage and the volume of every single building. So again, you just want to basically tell them out loud of how you would come to the answer if you had all the information available. And that's really all you got to do. And again, these questions can really vary and completely be all over the place. Don't let them throw you off. Take time to think about it and just slowly talk through how you would do it out loud. Last but not least, we have our advanced modeling based questions. So these will primarily revolve around your knowledge of how an M&A model might work or how an LBO model might work. And again, these aren't things you would expect in every single type of investment banking interview. They might more occur when you're in a investment banking interview for a M&A specific firm, or you're at a private equity firm, etc. And these questions are kind of around things like, how can you tell if a merger is accretive or dilutive? Or if you're a private equity firm, what are some characteristics you might look for in an acquisition target and why? And again, these aren't things that you really need to prepare for every single type of investment banking interview. Again, if you're going for more of a M&A specific firm or something like that, where they have more of a niche in a strategy, then yeah, you might want to prepare for these types of questions, but normally you don't need to expect this type of stuff. So for our next type of investment banking interview questions, we have the market-based questions, which is kind of a follow-up to the technical interview questions we just went through. And the whole idea behind these types of questions is for them to figure out how much you know about what's actually going on in the market now. And these are things that could be related to interest rates, what's going on with the Fed, different types of earnings that might be going on, IPO activity, M&A activity, things going on at a macro level, or if you're interviewing for a commodities specific investment bank, things like what's going on with oil prices and stuff like that. And now this is just a matter of you being able to keep up with stuff, reading, making sure you know what's going on. And we put out a daily newsletter for a lot of our students, which is pretty much like a Spark Notes version of the Wall Street Journal, but more in depth on things that are actually important. So if you're interested in subscribing to that, it's called the Breakfast Check. You can click the link below and literally read through 30 seconds of stuff in the morning to stay on top of things. And that's really all you need to do. And then maybe prior to the interview, just dig a little bit more into the topics, just so you're really, really familiar with this type of stuff. But beyond that, as long as you're keeping up with the market, you should be fine with these types of questions. Next up, we have our experience-based investment banking interview questions. Now, here's the thing. If you've actually made it to the interview, then you're doing pretty good on the experience side of things. Because the number one factor in terms of actually getting an investment banking interview in the first place is having relevant experience. Now, in terms of these questions in the interview, this is just kind of more stuff like walk me through your resume, or they just might ask you more questions on some of the stuff you might have done in terms of things at school, internships, etc. You don't really need to over-prepare for these. It's just a matter of maybe telling them a little bit more about what you've done, why, etc. And like I said before, if you got experience and you did good in the first place, you're in the interview. So obviously you did something right. Now, what's really important here, which is what I'm going to get into now, is the uniqueness and personality types of questions. So like I mentioned earlier, there's one specific type of investment banking interview question that you need to absolutely crush in the interview, and that's this one. So these are the personality, uniqueness, kind of story-based questions. Now, why is this so important? It's so important because if you really, really want to land the job or the internship, you need to be unique, you need to connect with the interviewer, and you just need to do something that's going to help you stand out and really make them remember you at the end of the day. Now, we have a whole other video dedicated to the why investment interview question, which you can click with the link below. And this is extremely, extremely important to really, really nail down. And the whole idea of it is you just really need to come up with some really weird and unique story that you can tell that's going to, one, help you stand out, two, grab their attention right away, and three, just give them something that's going to help them remember you later on. So whether it's a story about some really famous person you met and how that led you to investment banking, or maybe it's a story about your dad back in the day in the 80s in the junk bond era or something like that. That's kind of how you got interested in the space. Whatever it is, you need to have a really, really weird, unique story that's going to help you stand out and really, really make you seem like a much different candidate than all the bullshit generic answers they get half the time in this interview. Now, besides that, these types of questions really aren't even questions half the time. This is just where you need to do a really, really good job of almost like sucking up and stroking these people's ego a little bit. And again, what you really want to do is you want to be able to connect with the interviewer. So if you find out that the guy likes football, go off on a tangent talking about football. Or if you found out that this guy played lacrosse in college and maybe you played lacrosse in college, go talk about that. Whatever it is, you need to find some sort of common ground or connection between you and the interviewer that's really, really going to make them like you and really increase your chances of actually getting the job. Because half the time, these investment banks are pretty much like a fraternity. They have to like you to hire you. No matter how smart you are or how experienced you might be, if they don't like you, they're not going to hire you. And I've seen a lot of different cases where students that didn't have as strong as a background or didn't have those ideal internships get the job at the end of the day because they did a better job of connecting with the interviews or they had a better story. So whatever it is, if you know who you're interviewing with ahead of time, make sure you've done some research on the person so you have really, really good talking points with these people. Because like I said, you need to have a really unique story and you have to really, really be able to connect with these people. Because at the end of the day, they're going to hire the person that they like the most, regardless of how much you might know in terms of the technicals. Next up, we have our firm-based investment banking interview questions. Now, half the time, these don't come out as questions, but it's really just more of you being able to show your knowledge of the firm. And the whole idea here and what you really need to do is do some research on some of the deals that companies might have done recently. So if you're interviewing for a healthcare team at an investment bank, look at some of the healthcare deals they might have done. So that way you could talk about them and have a really good conversation in the interview. Or if you know someone that actually works there, be able to talk about that, bring up that person. But whatever it is, you want to be able to show that you've done some research on the firm, the deals, the people, whatever it is, to show that you just didn't randomly apply to it and that you have a specific reason for applying for this job at this firm. So that leads me into our last category here, which are who you know types of questions. Now, this will kind of go along with the question, why JP Morgan? Why Morgan Stanley? Why Goldman Sachs, etc. And the whole idea with that question is for you to just name drop, name drop, name drop. So if you're interviewing at a firm in a specific department, you most definitely better have networked with someone in the department ahead of time. The more people you know on the inside, the better your chances of actually getting the job or the internship at the end of the day. So if they ask you, why JP Morgan, you can go into a story about how you talked to so-and-so and they told you about deal A with company B, et cetera, and you just start telling all these stories about these different people you talk to, their experiences, and why, after hearing those stories, you just knew that working at JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs would just be a perfect fit for you. And again, it's really, really competitive when you're trying to get into a lot of these different investment banking jobs. But your biggest advantage is your network and how many people you actually know on the inside. If you've got 5 people pushing for you versus another student who may only have 1, the guy with the 5 people's probably got a better chance. So the more you can name drop and the more you have done with the networking ahead of time is going to greatly increase your chances of actually securing the internship and the job at the end of the day. So just make sure that you have a bunch of different stories you can tell about the people that work there ahead of time and how you talked to them and you met them. And that's kind of got you interested in investment banking at Guggenheim or whatever it is. That's what you're going to have to do to really, really crush that answer. If you found this video helpful, feel free to subscribe to us or follow us by clicking the link below or hitting the like button. If you're looking for more advanced strategies like this or more strategies on different topics, feel free to head over to our site at Tier 1 Wall Street and subscribe to our newsletter where we send out strategies that aren't posted on the blog. Now I'm going to turn it over to you. What other types of investment banking interview questions are you looking to absolutely crush in the interview? Are there other types of things that you would have liked us to expand on? Feel free to let us know by commenting below.